Bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue pour ce nouveau rendez-vous de Penser le présent. Il y en a encore 2 jusqu'aux vacances de Noël. Je vous le dis au passage, on recevra Gala Hernandez Lopez, la réalisatrice, mardi soir, et jeudi soir, la curatrice Anna Collin, avant de clore ce premier trimestre. Mais avant tout, ce soir, nous sommes très très heureux, très honorés de recevoir Hartmut Rosa, grand philosophe et sociologue venu spécialement pour cette rencontre ce soir. Vous, Christian Joschke, qui est avec nous, que vous connaissez toutes et tous, puisqu'il est professeur d'histoire de l'art aux Beaux-Arts de Paris, va être en conversation avec Hartmut Rosa ce soir, donc je vais rapidement leur laisser la parole. Je voulais simplement vous dire qu'il allait être question d'accélération de rythme de vie ce soir, de résonance, mais aussi, j'imagine, de plein d'autres choses. Et on a mis pour les étudiants et les étudiantes quelques ouvrages d'Hartmut Rosa sur la table que vous pouvez retrouver bien évidemment à la bibliothèque, puisque la plupart de ces écrits ont été traduits en français aux éditions La Découverte. Donc ne vous privez pas de cela, puisque vous pouvez les retrouver à la bibliothèque de l'école. Je vous souhaite à toutes et à tous déjà un immense merci à Hartmut Rosa d'être avec nous ce soir, et bonne conversation à vous deux. Et c'est oui, la rencontre est en anglais ce soir. Donc, mais Hartmut Rosa parle français, et si vous préférez poser vos questions en français, n'hésitez pas, pas d'inquiétude à ce propos.
Vous m'entendez bien ? Donc je suis Christian Joschke. Audrey m'a déjà présenté. J'espère que le fait que la rencontre soit en anglais convienne à tout le monde. Ça a été, je crois, annoncé ainsi. Sachez que M. Rosa comprend le français s'il est parlé relativement clairement. Il ne faut pas parler trop vite. Et que vous pourrez intervenir à tout moment pour poser des questions, en particulier à la fin de la discussion, mais vous pouvez aussi nous interrompre si vous le souhaitez. Avec des questions en français, et Monsieur Rosa répondra en anglais si vous êtes d'accord avec ça. On avait pensé le faire en allemand, mais c'est peut-être un peu plus difficile encore que l'anglais. It is a great honor. Thank you so much, Hartmut Rosa, for being here today. And it's a great pleasure for me, and I feel I have been like promoted somehow to be the respondent for Hartmut Rosa. I will present you to the audience. Even though I think everyone knows your work, everyone has read some of your books, maybe not all of them, and some of you may also have seen the documentary film, which is running on Arte since now more than 1 year, I think, and which is absolutely insightful. Hartmut Rosa has begun his work as a sociologist and philosopher with a dissertation on Charles Taylor, which dissertation you have done with Axel Honneth, which binds you to what we call the Frankfurt School. And as a matter of fact, in your books you discuss the arguments of Adorno, a little bit less Habermas, which is one of the most well-known philosophers of the Frankfurt School, and of course the arguments of Axel Honneth, especially in your book about resonance. After that, you have written an habilitation, we say habilitation in French, which is in English, I guess, in the US called The Second Book, which is the masterpiece of well, which it's not your masterpiece. I mean, you have so many, but this book was aimed at a very specific topic, which you called acceleration, Beschleunigung, and which aims with that concept, you aim a sociology of the social structures of time. This endeavor has been already led by Norbert Elias ages ago with a very small piece. And the notion of acceleration has always also been reflected by Paul Virilio in France. And I think maybe you will tell us a little bit more about the way he deals with this concept and what is different in your approach. After this second book, you have opened up the field of sociology, and your work was greeted with many prizes, and you're teaching at the University of Jena since 2005, and you have taught also abroad at the University of Harvard and at the New York New School of Research. So let me just introduce some of the notions that you have put in the field of sociology and of what you called also philosophical sociology. First, acceleration, it's the most influential concept. It is an analysis of the structures of time in a much more comprehensive field, including different levels of time, which was not the main goal of Elias, and also not very present in Paul Virilio. These different levels of time is the technological time, the time of daily life experience, pace of life. And the historical time, or you call it also the social change, sozialer Wandel. So this had been a great success, the notion of acceleration. It resonates with many experiences that we have had over the past 20 years, especially in 2020, during the Great Lockdown. It was a kind of the biggest social experience of time that the history of humanity have ever experienced. And in regard to your notion of acceleration, this lockdown during the pandemic was a very interesting period. This concept has also been discussed in the debate over the economic growth and its environmental consequences. And some authors pushed the idea, very radical and frightening idea of accelerationism, in a manifesto that has been linked to the alt-right movement. And since then, so that was the first piece which we all know as your invention and the work that has changed our vision of sociology during the past 20 years. Since then, you have expanded the field of sociology to what you would call in German Weltbeziehung, relationship to the world experience, we should say. It's maybe you will contest. I mean, you will tell me if I'm wrong, but it's somehow different from the sociology of time that you have written in Acceleration. It is a much broader context, an analysis of many different levels of social dynamic. The most influential concepts that you have brought in the field of sociology is now resonance, a far-reaching notion that describes many aspects of human life, and linked to this idea of resonance, another concept that you have brought in that short book translated into French into Rendre le monde indisponible, the idea of uncontrollability or unavailability of the world. Maybe the last concept that we will try to address today is the notion of social energy, which is your most recent research. So that's maybe for the second part of our discussion. I would like to first maybe begin with a first question on very general question on these different notions, so that we set some very general idea of your work before going into more specific questions. So, acceleration. I have already described the 3 levels of acceleration. Your assumption is that we live in a late stage of modernity, and despite the different discussions over modernity and postmodernity, we still are in a late stage of modernity. And this modernity is defined by our relationship to time. The relationship to time is changing towards what you call an acceleration. And that is the main argument. Maybe you can describe a little bit how you came to this idea.
Of acceleration, yeah, ok.
Yeah.
Oui, mais d'abord tout, merci beaucoup à Christian Joschke pour cette introduction. et très gentil. Et merci à vous et à Audrey pour l'invitation. Je suis très heureux d'être ici avec vous à l'École nationale supérieure des Beaux-Arts de Paris. Quelque chose comme ça. Merci.
Bravo.
Enfin, je pratique le français chaque jour avec Duolingo, mais c'est pas assez maintenant pour vraiment discuter les concepts philosophiques et sociologiques vraiment profondément. C'est pour ça que je vais parler avec vous en anglais, mais j'espère que la prochaine fois, je suis capable de le faire en français. Okay. So the question was, how did I arrive at the acceleration notion? I think there were several reasons. One was really a kind of almost a physical experience, because I live in actually you have your origins there too, right? In the Black Forest, La Forêt Noire en Allemagne, close to Switzerland. But it's a very rural, remote, mountainous area. And then I wasn't academic or so, and I had not seen much of the world when I, as an undergraduate, went to London and to study at the London School of Economics. And whenever I returned to my village, I felt there is a difference. It's really a different way of being in the world, right? Which I think eventually led to my concept of notre relation au monde, unsere Weltbeziehung. It's a different way of being in the world, and I thought it has to do with my sense of time. In London, everything seems to be so fast, as you described. And okay, let's stop for a second. Everything seemed to be so fast, and in the rural area, I thought it's a different pace of life, but it's also a different way of being in time. And then I started to wonder about the temporality of our society and of our lives. And I came across a paradox which is really fascinating, namely that we really are very efficient in saving time, right? We get faster and faster, particularly with the technologies which you described, in transport, in production, in communication. So actually we should have a lot of time because we can do everything we need to do in much less time than 50 years before or 100 years before, right? We can travel faster, we can produce things at a faster pace, we can communicate at a much higher rate, so we should have an abundance of time, but we don't have it. So the question was, where does the time go, right, which we save, right? And eventually, you mentioned it, right? I mean, at first I thought, that was what I wanted to work about. And then actually my colleagues said, there is no real acceleration, right? Some things speed up, other things slow down. It has always been the same. And I thought that's wrong. It's not always the same, right? There really is a speed up. So I wanted to see what is speeding up. And I decided, or I found, that's my conceptualization, right? You're absolutely right that people like Virilio have written about it before, right? But I think he did it the French way, right? Very suggestive, very inspirative, but not very systematical, at least at that point. So my idea was, okay, let's distinguish between technological accelerations, you mentioned that, the acceleration of the change, the pace of change, right? The world changes every day, so to speak. And the pace of life. We try to get more things done per unit of time, right? So I came across, so my definition was, there are things which slow down, for example, traffic in Paris, right? Or traffic in other places, but there is a systematic imbalance, right? The forces, the need for speed is higher than the decelerating forces. And in the end, in the book on resonance, I did not give up the theory of acceleration, but I actually kind of rephrased it. I now use, and that's to answer your question about still in modernity, but in post-modernity, I call it late modernity. The question was, why is it that we do not have the time which we save, right? Where does it go? And I answered that question with my notion of dynamic stabilization. And that means we live in a society which needs to grow, to accelerate, and to innovate incessantly, year by year, right? Just to keep in place, right? Just to reproduce our institutions and our structures, right? So year by year, you have to produce more in France. You have to achieve economic growth, right? And you do that by speeding up, by innovating, by creating disruptive changes, and so on. So this is my definition of modernity, right? What is a modern society? There's a lot of debate probably here at the university or the école, the school of the École Normale Supérieure, aussi, about what modernity is. There's a lot of debates. It's problematic, but I have a rather easy definition. A society can be called modern when its mode of stabilization, right? We can do it easier. A society can be called modern when it systematically, structurally requires economic growth, social acceleration, and cultural innovation in order to maintain its structure or the institutional status quo, right? So if you do not speed up, if you don't achieve growth, then the whole of France will be in trouble, right? Or it's the same in Germany and in the US and even in China and in India. That's why it is a modern society. Without growth, innovation, acceleration, we get in crisis. We cannot keep the jobs, our economy is going down the hill, then we cannot pay the pensions, maintain the health schemes, the cultural institutions, and so on. So that's modernity. And we are still in this logic, right? The logic of, look at the political parties from left to right, they all want growth. We already have too many cars, too many planes, too many accelerators, actually too much clothes. We throw them away. We produce too much food. Of course, there are people who are still hungry, but those are not the ones who can pay the food we produce. So actually next year, France will produce more food and it will be bought by you, right? By those who can afford to buy it. And we will either throw it away without eating it, what we do in increasing numbers, or actually we will eat too much. We are already obese, right? But the food industries need to grow. So that's dynamic stabilization. And I call it late modernity because we have lost the sense of moving forward through acceleration, growth, and innovation, right? I would really say that culturally, on the cultural project of modernity, was driven by the promise that our life will be better. By producing more, we will overcome scarcity. By innovation, we will overcome ignorance, right? And also but also by growth and innovation, we will kind of make progress in everything. So look, in France, actually all over the world, almost for centuries, for decades at least, parents said, we do not have so much, we work hard, but our kids will have a better life. For me, this is almost the core of modernity, right? The kids will have a better life, this intergenerational idea. And a better life doesn't just mean they will have more money. It means they will have better conditions to lead their lives, right? Better health care, better education, more rights, a better political participation. It will be a freer life. And late modernity is the stage we're in now. This promise has kind of waned. And you see it from the social data, right? Now, all over the world, 70% of people think, particularly middle classes, we have quite a lot. We work hard, but our kids will have a worse life, right? They will not be able to maintain what we have. So that's, I think, when late modernity starts. But we are not in post-modernity, since we still need acceleration, innovation, growth to maintain what we have.
Thank you very much. I think that's very clear. And it's also very clear that that your work is a critique of acceleration.
Yes, yes.
And you have been described as a critical philosopher of acceleration, of the acceleration movement, as someone who would defend deceleration,
yes,
the slowing down of life.
Yes.
But your response to that critique of acceleration is not deceleration, because as you showed in your book on acceleration, deceleration is a function of acceleration.
Yeah.
So you have in business management, in other realm of life, a strategy of deceleration that might lead to more or better or more organized acceleration. So your response to the critique to the acceleration movement, to the acceleration of late modernity, is the concept of resonance. So how does resonance answer to the problem or the question or the matter of fact that our lives are accelerating?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, it was quite astonishing because I had written this book on acceleration and I really studied on how our temporal structures change and also our way of kind of dealing with time, of being in time, to kind of quote Heidegger, right? And our perception of time. But I was really interested in acceleration. So I was really surprised in France, but also particularly in Germany. I was pretty soon called the guru of slowness, of deceleration. It's really true. They called me the prophet of slowness, the guru of slowness, the pope of slowness. And I thought that's really strange because deceleration almost doesn't figure in the book, right? Even right now, about 2 years ago, there was a kind of, I don't know who did it, there was a kind of statistic. People asked students of sociology, what is the title of Hartmut Rosa's first big book? And 75% of German students thought the title is deceleration. Right? This is really strange. It's the opposite, right? It's acceleration. So I really, as you said, I thought, well, I don't really think, we live in this logic of speeding up life in order to kind of maintain its structures. So to simply turn it around and slow things down doesn't change so much. It's being in the same dimension, right? If you still think and work in the same logic, to simply turn it around, it's probably not getting any better. But my critique of slowness, at least of slowness as the end goal of society, right? I thought that's a bit stupid because number one, if you live in a society which can only maintain itself by dynamic stabilization, right, which needs speed up, then if you slow down, it simply breaks down, like we could see in Greece or in other countries. So we need to change the cultural and the structural fabric, and I am in favor of that, right? I want to have a fundamental change of society, not simply slowing it down, because if you slow down an acceleration society, you get breakdown. It's like if you have a roller coaster which does the looping, and you slow it down, it falls down, right? It's not very good. But also slowness is not an end in itself. A slow fire engine is not better than a fast one, and a slow internet connection is just bad for us, right? But number two, I thought, so that's my second argument. My first argument, we cannot simply slow things down. We need to change the whole logic of society. Number two, slowness is not good per se. So I started to wonder, why do people dream of a slower life? And I realized, well, our critique of speed, and that's what I wanted to do all along, is that it leads to a wrong way of being in the world. It leads to a distortion in our relationship to the world, right? And this has always been called in the Frankfurt School, right, in critical theory, alienation, a wrong way of being in the world, of being with people. You can be alienated from other people, from places, even from yourself, right, or from the work you do. Alienation is in a distortion. It's a kind of, it has been defined by Rahel Yegi and Michael Teunissen and many others as a relationship without a true relationship, right? So if you are forced to be very fast all the time, then you somehow, you miss the possibility to really connect. So people dream of a different way of being with people, of being with nature, of being with work. Even work is very interesting, right? Or of course, art, right? I mean, you see the Spotify logic. You have to bring the refrain within 30 seconds. Otherwise, people will kind of skip forward and then you don't get any money. So that leads to an alienated form of, at least it has the danger, right, of an alienated form of connecting even to art. So my claim was, the problem is not speed per se. Speed becomes a problem when it leads to alienation, when it leads to a loss of our capacity to really connect. And then I realized there is a problem that we don't know what a non-alienated form of life is. Because in critical theory, with Adorno, Marcuse, Benjamin, of course with Marx, yes, I mean they all used alienation, right? But the question is, what is a non-alienated form of life? Marx even had, he actually went back to kind of almost a conception of the true human nature or so, right? But we don't know, that's a very difficult concept. You cannot really use philosophically because we don't know what that nature is. It kind of changes clearly, right? But there are other, my claim is that we did not really have a convincing explanation of what a non-alienated form of life is. And this is why alienation kind of fell out with Habermas, you mentioned, even with Honneth. Honneth didn't really talk about alienation. Then critical theory turned to justice. They really thought, okay, we have to criticize injustice. And I thought, yes, that's a huge problem in modern society. We all know it, right? We are very unequal and very unjust. But I thought, underneath even the injustice, there is another problem, a wrong mode of being in the world and to the world. And I still claim this is what creates injustice and what kind of explains why there is still so much injustice. So I was looking for a definition of non-alienation, and this is how I ended up with resonance, right? So for me, resonance really is the opposite of alienation. That's how I like to introduce it, right? And I really say, I think I always claim we can make a quick test of alienation here. Some of you might feel alienated, particularly when you sit in the middle, you cannot really leave, right? So you might ask yourself, what am I doing here, right? I got here by mistake, right? This talk here is kind of totally senseless. It has nothing to do with me. I don't like the people next to me. This is an awful space. Also, that's alienation, right? So you have a kind of relation because now you sit here in this conference and you came here on your own decision. I don't know whether some of you are here because they have to take it for credits. That's
No.
different.
No one.
Then you are not alienated, then you are repressed or oppressed. But if you came here voluntarily and then you ask yourself, what am I doing here? I'm in the wrong place. That's alienation, right? You do not connect. You feel disconnected from what's going on here, from the people around you, from the space, and then even from yourself. What am I doing here? So the opposite is when there is some resonance. All of a sudden you find something interesting, right? Something speaks to you. It might be what we discuss here, but very often it's not that, right? It's an idea which comes to you, which is only vaguely connected to what we talk, or maybe it's your neighbor or so, right? But something touches you. Something speaks to you. And then you kind of answer it. I mean, I have a little cold, sorry. But it's okay. I mean, if some of you might teach, right, or maybe many of you teach, and you know what it means to be kind of in a classroom and you feel alienation, right? The kids or the students are not really interesting, right? They are tired, they are dull, they are disinterested, maybe they even hate you, right? That's kind of alienation, right? And when there's resonance, you really see a change in their whole bodily habit, and you see it in their eyes. Something speaks to you. It's a kind of dynamic connection. All of a sudden, the whole body, the whole mind is in this. It's a kind of resonance, is a dynamic movement. Something speaks to me. It's not necessarily it's definitely not harmony, right? It might be, it always has an element of difference. That's interesting, right? I've never seen it this way, right? That's resonance, not, yes, I totally agree with you. So resonance is not harmony, right? Resonance is a difference which speaks to you. And then you answer it. You answer it with your eyes, with your body, with your mind, right? And of course, art is a paradigm example for this, right? Very often you might feel alienated from works of art, but all of a sudden, this is how we go to museums, right? At least me. I walk around and I can't really connect, and sometimes I feel alienated, particularly from modern art, right? But all of a sudden, something kind of grips me, right? Something speaks to me. It might even annoy me, but I answer it, I move towards it. So resonance is this connection, being touched by something. I even speak of being called by something. You can refer to Bruno Latour. Then we answer it, and there's a transformation in this process, right? So these are the three elements. Affection, something speaks to me. Response, I move outward and connect with it. Transformation, I don't stay the same in this process, but uncontrollability means you cannot enforce it, right? There's nothing we can do to get the resonance, right? If you think it's boring or stupid, what we say, then shouting more or kind of making more efforts probably doesn't help. Most of the time it just creates the opposite, right? So these are the elements of resonance.
So the conditions for resonance are explained in both your books, but you told about uncontrollability of the world, and you oppose it. You oppose controllability, availability, la disponibilité of the world,
yes.
To reachability, l'atteignabilité. Yes. So I would like to hear you about this difference between the two ways of being in the world. Having the world being controlled by you, being available to any kind of use, and the other term, the other notion, means something like you could reach something, but it's not available. It might be available. It's not completely, and it's not completely available. Mm-hmm. So this difference is, I think, very important for understanding what resonance means.
Yes. Yes, that's absolutely right. I think we can only get in resonance with something which we do not completely control. If you have complete control over something, for example, in a relationship, sorry for this. If you have complete control, then it's no longer resonance, right? I mean, then you can. One good example is really a loving relationship, right? If you control the person you love, it's no longer love. I really think that all of our yearning, the interesting parts of our lives, always at the border between something we can reach, as you say, right? We can have access to, but not control. I mean, it even starts with children, right? Their parents must be responsive in a certain way, but it doesn't mean that they always do what the kids want. So the kids certainly don't have control over the parents. If they do, it's very bad for children, right? And so the kid calls for the mama or the father, but that doesn't mean that the father will or the mother will always come, right? So it's a kind of responsive relationship which gives independence to both sides. And that's what makes things interesting. In this book, Rendre le Monde Indisponible, which I think maybe is the best book I've written so up to date, which is very small, right? Or it's relatively small. But I refer to piano player Igor Levit, you might know. And he was asked whether he can still play the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, right? Because the journalist thought, well, he has played it thousands of times and he's heard it so often, so it's kind of boring. And Igor Levit says, yes, I can't get enough of it. And that's because every time it sounds different. I never completely control it, right? There is this difference which is there, right? It's not control, but of course, I mean, but of course, it's a kind of, he can play it, right? And as he develops, I mean, probably now he doesn't need to develop anymore, but normally if you're a player, you develop your capacities. And then the music says something different, but you have never complete control over it. And once you think, now I know it completely, right? Now I have it completely under control, then it becomes a dead world. And that's kind of another take on modernity. I believe modernity is the attempt to get complete control over the world. And the interesting thing is then it's no longer speaking. It becomes a dead world, a silent world. I really think one example which I always use, and then it makes my students furious, but it's my own experience, Spotify, right? I mean, I find it so interesting. For me, it's really true. I still collect CDs, right? Maybe I should go to vinyl, but I collect CDs. I bought 2 today. I always go to Gisbert et Joseph here in it's amazing what they have, right? And the thing is, yes, so I love music, I'm addicted. But when I'm in a hotel, for example, I turn on Spotify and there's everything, I can listen to everything. It leads to the fact that I don't want to listen to any of the music. I mean, right? I mean, so my claim is a world which you can completely control is no longer resonant, right? It's no longer speaking. It's easy to see with persons. It's kind of easy to see with everything.
Do you think that the concept of resonance gives us a kind of basis for a theory of artistic inspiration?
That the theory of resonance gives us a basis
for thinking what is actually inspiration. How do we get inspired by something?
I think that's absolutely the case, right? I have a chapter on art in the Resonance book, and I've written a small book on heavy metal music, right? Even there, I should not have said.
Yes, of course.
I was too early, but I find it very interesting. In rock music, I really love rock music, so I don't want to talk about other forms of pop music so much because it might be a bit different there. But in the whole of in a lot of pop and all of the rock music, the idea of the group is extremely strong, right? Fans want to have a group because now technology is a kind of changes. So very often there is no real group, right? It's just artists, individual artists who kind of send files around. But the fans insist, are you a real band? They always ask, are you a real group? And if one member leaves, there's always concern, oh, are you still a group? Is this group still working? And if you think of the big groups, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, to take the 3 greatest, I think, right? It always was a kind of fine balance between McCartney and Lennon, or Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, or David Gilmour and Roger Waters. And that's our idea of how creative processes work. There is this kind of, it's tension, but it's also cooperation, right? And sometimes they are inspired and sometimes they are not. And the question is whether it comes together, right? So I think that has always been the idea, certainly in romantic idea, inspiration. It's uncontrollable, right? I mean, the more you try, particularly when tomorrow I have to come up with a great idea, it doesn't work, right? It's the same in sociology, right? When I'm supposed to write, I think there are really 2 modes. I find this really interesting. When I'm supposed to write an article or so, right? I can do it without resonance because, of course, I know some things. I kind of reconnect them. And I might even think of, oh, I know there is Bruno Latour has written on it. Let's see what he writes, and then I refer to it. It's without resonance, right? So resonance is really when all of a sudden I feel something speaks to me, and I'm capable of making something of it, right? But it's a kind of, as we all know, I'm sure it's the same with artistic work. It's probably not when you want to have it, right? It's when you, for me, it's really the traditional forms. I always go for walks, right? Nietzsche once said you can tell the difference between books who are written in the library or books which are written on plein air, right? Out there. And I think my books are really written on plein air. And then I walk around and I struggle and sometimes nothing comes to me. And then I go to bed and then 2 minutes after I want to go to sleep, I have the idea, or sometimes I don't have the idea. Sometimes it comes in the morning in the shower and sometimes it doesn't, right? But that's exactly how resonance works, right? Callability, you can kind of try to create the conditions that the idea comes to you, but you cannot enforce it.
Thank you very much. Before opening up the discussion, I would like to ask you a last question on your more recent research topic on social energy.
Yeah.
What is the link between what you said about resonance and this new idea, this new research field, which is social energy? How does social energy appear or disappear? It has obviously something to do with resonance.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, again, there are many reasons why I think of social energy, but one is that, you know, even when I talked about social acceleration, I always said, if you want to accelerate something, you have to infuse it with energy. You have to somehow, it's an energetic process. And I always said it's not just physical energy, which we need, like carbon-based oil and so on, but also nuclear or solar or wind energy. But it's also political energy, because politicians all the time try to make us work, right, to activate us. And it's also psychic energy, right? Because, you know, it's not systems, it's not even capital which grows, accelerates, and innovates. It's us, it's the subjects who have to run faster next year and achieve growth and come up with innovations. So what kind of energy do we need for this? And then I realized it seems we have a dual energy crisis in modernity, right? One is the kind of carbon-based climate crisis. Also, we use too many resources, right? But the other is a psychic energy crisis. It seems we are running out of energy, right? We have to invest more and more. And then I realized it's somehow the same thing. You know what I said about modernity? We still need to go faster, but we lost the sense of moving forward. And I think in terms of energy, it's this sense we invest more and more, and we don't get anything back. I mean, that's the thing with burnout, right? People who get burnout, and this really is an epidemic, huge crisis all over the world. I really think we still underestimate it. I mean, today, the Spiegel is our most important weekly journal, right? It's kind of weekly, but it's digital, so it comes up with, but it doesn't matter. So the title story of this week is again about the frightening numbers of mental health problems with young people, right? Particularly with young people. And you know, I really think what is missing, and I think we still don't get it, right? What is missing, because I work a lot with young people, actually for 26 years, I've been running the same summer school, so for the same age group, right? For the same kind of people, and I really think the difference is there is so little lust for life and trust in life. I think really those are the two differences. Lust for life means we really this joy in life of doing things which are also a little crazy and irrational. I mean, young people today don't go to parties because it's not completely safe or so, right? But I think really laughing, I mean, when you walk around Paris or Berlin, it doesn't matter, right? There's so little joy. It's really true. The eyes are tired and the faces are tired, right? And it's stress, I have to do this, I have to get this, I have to get better, and this, I have to answer this. But it's also a lack of trust in life, right? I really think youngsters have always been like that. Yes, they did risky things. Sometimes they died. I'm not saying that's good, right? But it's true. I mean, Jonathan Haidt writes, children have to fall from trees in order to, sometimes to break something, in order to develop a basic trust in life, right? In your body, in your neighbors, in nature. But we are afraid of everything. The air might be polluted and the neighbor might be a murderer and so on, right? So whatever. But so my feeling is we somehow are, my claim is we are lacking energy on 3 levels: physical energy, where the energy crisis, psychic energy, but also political energy, right? Social movement. I mean, if there is political energy, it's moved to the right, to Front National in France, right? Very interesting, right? There seems to be a kind of energy, but it seems to be rather a destructive form of energy, right? But with social movements, even with states, I mean, take Germany, for example. I mean, it seems we only get destructive energies. We want to get ready for war, right? Maybe you too. But we cannot repair our railway system. It's totally broken. And it seems like completely, that's what they say. It's impossible. In the next 40 years, nothing will improve. They're trying to build, I mean, it took them 30 years to build the airport in Berlin, but now we have a kind of railway station in Stuttgart for 20 years. And they said, oh no, we cannot open it up 2 years from now. So I think it's a total lack of political energy, right? Where has the energy to do things, to get involved with life gone? So I think we suffer an energy crisis.
Is that something different than what the people at the end of the 19th century called neurasthenia?
Yeah. No, I think there is clearly a connection. I mean, the neurasthenia, it was a form of burnout. I mean, or was very, very close to it. But that's not surprising, because, as I say, acceleration is not new, right? This logic of, I mean, the logic of modernity, I really think it has to do with capitalism. I mean, in the end, we have to talk about that, right? It's the logic of capital accumulation, which kind of enforces this kind of speeding up and the investment of energy. And I think, I mean, what I'm interested in, no, I will say that in a minute. This logic of capital accumulation and social acceleration has been around for centuries, and I think it creates periodic crises. And the neurasthenia discourse was a bit similar, but I think it wasn't so. I mean, it's hard to predict how epidemic it really was, right? But I would say it's a kind of recurrent thing, right? The need to speed up just to maintain what you have has been around for centuries. So I think it's comparable. It's comparable, but but let me make one argument. I think part of the energy problem is that we think of it in input-output relations, right? So we invest energy in order to get something out of it, but that's already wrong, because if you take a classroom, I think you can think of artistic situations very clearly. If you have to work in groups, right? I think sometimes you do, right? Where you inspire, or you can take a classroom. Sometimes there is simply no energy in the room. If it goes wrong, right, you really try. Maybe you as a teacher, you do more, right? You think you work hard like an idiot and nothing comes back. So you feel totally exhausted at the end. But the other participants have the same feeling, right? We tried, but today it was horrible. So in the end, everything leaves the classroom or the studio with the feeling of, I feel completely drained and wasted, right? And at other times, all of a sudden there's energy. This, I call it circulating energy. It's circulating social energy. I take it from Stephen Greenblatt. And there is something going on in the room, right? And then if it goes well, let's say you have a discussion and some great ideas come up and another idea comes up. The interesting thing is I use Hannah Arendt for this. You cannot even say who came up with the idea. It comes from the middle, right? It's circulating. But then everyone leaves with more energy. Right, so social energy is created in the interaction. It's not I invest it and you take it, or it's the other way around, right? So there can be, we either leave with more, or most of us leave with more energy or with less energy, but it's not I put it in and you take it away, or the other way around, right? It's circulating.
And do you think the fact that our lives are more and more monitored is that we are monitoring our own lives, that we are planning the whole schedule of the day, that everything is planned in advance. Does that make energy less?
I think it is. I mean, actually, I've written a kind of intermediate book because my idea is, you never know. I consider sociology to be in a kind of art form, right? And my plan is to write one thick book, and that will be my end, social energy. It might take 10 more years or so. But I've written a smaller book, which will also be published in French, in hopefully not too long in the future. But the German version will come out on January 13th. And there I think I discovered something very interesting. I think this energy crisis has to do with, basically you just said it, with a shift in the way we act in the world, right? It's a bit difficult to put it in English, but in German I say, wir gehen vom Handeln zum Vollziehen. And in English it means agency, so to speak. If to feel a real agent means we act on our experience, but with judgment and with a kind of, you know, we have German terms. Which
de l'action à l'accomplissement. Vollziehen,
okay,
de l'action à l'accomplissement de l'action. Oui.
Okay, I have a challenge for you. Maybe you can translate it into French, because in German it works so wonderful. I say in German, I say, right, an agency involves Augenmaß und Fingerspitzengefühl. It's untranslatable.
Fingerspitzengefühl, c'est le tact.
Ja, le tact. Ja.
Et l'autre, c'est
Augenmaß.
Augenmaß, c'est le...
It's impossible to translate, right? They call it the good eye, maybe in English. But what I mean is, you know, normally, that's the idea of the book, right? We normally, as human agents,
l'acuité à jauger, à jauger, c'est-à-dire à mesurer de l'œil, à mesurer les choses à l'œil nu.
Yeah,
ouais, enfin,
I mean, whatever, you know, as agents, as artists, you must kind of, yeah, actually it's interesting for artistic creation, we can discuss this, right? I would really say you kind of need experience, right? Let's say you work with the materiality, right? Whatever it is. So you have some experience with it. You know how it reacts and how it works. But you might even feel it in your fingers after some time. You develop a feeling for the materials, right? But of course you also use your eyes and your sense, and then you create something. That's agency, right? You act on your experience with your judgments. Yes, let's try this way, maybe this is a good way also. And actually, there's always emotion involved, right? Actually, when whatever you do, when it's finished, the action, those who know you could say whether you were in a good mood or in a bad mood or full of joy or full of hatred. When one experience, what I have, this thing only works with many examples and we don't have the time, but one is really, the French are very good at this, right? Cooking. When you cook, you need all of this, right? If you have some experience, you know how I don't know how to put the things together and so on, right? But you also have a kind of, and you also have it in the tip of your fingers, right? And you need a good eye, yes, a little more salt, or I can leave the thing a bit longer in the oven, or I have to take it out, and so on, right? So this is cooking. And actually, you see, it depends on your mood, what you cook, but also how you cook it. I mean, in German, at least, we have the saying that if it's very salty, then the cook was in love. That's what we say, right? But certainly, let's say if you're a family, right, and the kids come home, or you are the kid, doesn't matter, and then you probably can tell who cooked today, right? Because the mother cooks different from the father or from the son or from the daughter, right? So actually the meal is it's an expression of your personality and also of your mood. And it depended on your past experiences, but also on your situation. So actually there's a connection between situation, personality, judgment, and emotion. And actually we do everything we can in this society to cut the ties completely. I mean, in Germany now, there's a huge trend, which you might also have, we call it Thermomix. Do you know this instrument?
Eh oui. Le Thermomix, oui,
Yeah.
oui, bien sûr.
Yeah,
J'en ai pas. Hein.
Je
refuse.
It's my new hate thing, right? But even though I can't really cook.
It's a horrible machine.
But look, if you cook with Thermomix, I mean, of course it has its advantages. I mean, there are good reasons for this, but if you use this instrument, then you can no longer tell who cooked it. You can no longer tell who in what mood he or she was. It will always come out right because the machine tells you exactly what to do at what step, and a lot of things it does by itself, right? So you get the perfect meal, right? But that's no longer acting, agency, but it's executing, I call it, right? Or enacting. What's enacting? What was the French word?
Enacting.
Yeah, okay. So, right, and now the interesting thing, it's the same all over your workplace. I'm sure even in art, there are things where you no longer are the agent. You somehow program the machine, and then the machine is enacting it. But for example, one more example.
Exécuter.
Exécuter, yeah, you become an executant, right? But that's true even for kids. I mean, you know these Lego bricks, right, where they build, right? So I would really say 20 years ago, when I was young, everything was okay. Of course not. But we got a lot of Lego bricks. And then you could really say, actually, I always built houses. I loved houses, but I always put wheels underneath because I thought it's a house which is a car at the same time. But my parents always could tell, oh, this must have been Hartmut, right? Because he put the wheels under the house. And actually, even the way I built the house was kind of expressive of me. So now the kids no longer get a huge number of bricks. They get an exact, they get a package with which they build a Formula One race car or a specific Airbus airplane or so, and you execute building it together. You do it right or wrong, right? So I think in this way we deliberately cut the tie between emotion and action, but even between situation and action. And this is one of the reasons why we are going out of energy, I think, right? Because it's the emotions which give us the energy to act. I forgot which question I wanted to answer.
No, that was a very clear and very bright answer to my last question. Thank you very much, Hartmut Rosa, for this conversation. Thank you all for being here.
Merci à vous. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Merci.